Today, we journey into the heart of the Amazon rainforest, a place of ancient secrets, fierce battles, and untamed beauty. But beneath the canopy lies a silent war for survival. What's really happening in the world's greatest jungle? Stay with us as we uncover the true stories the forest has been whispering for centuries. Let's begin. Welcome to Chapter The Lost, where forgotten truths and hidden stories come alive. The heart that breathes. The rain whispered first, soft taps against a canopy stretching farther than the eye could imagine. Beneath the leaves, the Amazon stirred like an ancient giant dreaming in green. It was not just a place. It was a pulse, a breath, a memory woven in vines and mist. They called it the lungs of the earth, but lately it had begun to wheeze. At the edge of the Tapajos River, an elder named Anari stood beneath a towering ceiba tree. His bare feet sank into the soft soil, rich with centuries of life. His face, carved by time and sun, remained still as he listened. "When the forest speaks," he whispered, "we must answer before it falls silent." Around him, children from the Kayapo village listened wide-eyed, unaware that their world was changing faster than they could learn its stories. Anari was not a scientist or scholar. He had never seen a television, never left the forest. But he knew its rhythm. He knew which frogs sang before the rain, which vines could stop bleeding, which trails jaguars would never cross. His people had survived here for generations, not by conquering, but by listening. Now, even the trees had grown quiet. Just weeks ago, a strange sound had echoed through the forest, metal teeth grinding into bark, machines belching black smoke. The elders gathered in silence as a red slash appeared on the horizon. Trees, ancient as time, fell in rows. "They come again," Anari said grimly. It was not the first time. 1,000 kilometers away, no one heard the forest cry. In far-off cities, stock tickers blinked and contracts were signed. Timber, gold, land. Words that meant little to those who still lived by firelight and stars. But to Anari, they meant the edge of the world creeping closer. He took the children into the forest the next morning, guiding them to a glade filled with blue morpho butterflies and sweet-singing tanagers. "You must learn it now," he said, "before it forgets itself." One boy, Matto, tugged at his sleeve. "Can the forest die?" he asked. Anari looked at the trees, then at the scar in the distance where green had turned to gray. "Only if we let it." The sun was sinking when they returned to the village. Smoke hung low in the air. Anari lit a fire, scattered medicinal leaves into the flame, and began to chant. Not for ceremony, but for remembrance. Each word a seed, each pause a breath. The children sat close, eyes wide, as if understanding for the first time that this place, their home, was not invincible. Above them, the forest exhaled slowly. It was still breathing. For now. The hidden war. The machete hung at his side, not as a weapon, but as a tool. Chico Mendez wiped the sweat from his brow and looked out over the sea of rubber trees. To him, this was more than forest, it was livelihood, sanctuary, and home. Acre, in western Brazil, had raised him on the scent of latex and the rhythm of tapping trees at dawn. But now the forest was being swallowed by flames, and Mendez could no longer remain silent. In his youth, he had followed his father through the underbrush, slicing into trees with care and collecting the milky sap. It was honest work, built on harmony with nature. The rubber tappers took what they needed and left the forest standing. But by the 1980s, that balance was under siege. Cattle ranchers arrived with bulldozers and deeds backed by powerful men. They didn't tap the trees, they toppled them. Entire hectares vanished overnight, smoke rising like a funeral pyre. Mendez watched as friends were driven from their homes, their land burned for profit. The conflict was no longer about land. It was about survival. Chico began organizing. He brought together rubber tappers, indigenous tribes, and small farmers, people who had once labored separately but now shared a common enemy. He called for empate, human blockades that stood between chainsaws and trees. Unarmed, they formed lines with joined hands, facing men with guns and machines. "You can't kill the forest without killing us," he declared at one rally, his voice trembling but firm. The threats began almost immediately. Ranchers offered bribes, then bullets. Government officials turned a blind eye. But Mendez persisted, speaking at international forums and calling for global awareness. He wasn't just fighting for acre, he was fighting for the soul of the Amazon. In December of 1988, the war reached his doorstep. He had just returned from a trip, exhausted but hopeful. A land reform bill was gaining traction. There were rumors that parts of the rainforest might finally be protected. That night, as he sat in his modest home, a shotgun blast shattered the quiet. Chico Mendez died before he reached the hospital. The forest seemed to hold its breath. News of his murder spread quickly. International outrage followed. Protests surged in major cities. Journalists descended on Acre, documenting what Mendez had died to expose. His killers were eventually tried and convicted, but the cost had already been paid. Yet his death was not the end. 3 months later, Brazil created its first forest reserves for rubber tappers. Schools began teaching environmental justice. And in the heart of Acre, young leaders whispered Chico's name like a promise. His body had fallen, but his voice, echoing through trees and time, remained. In the shadow of his sacrifice, others would rise. The Green Labyrinth. The helicopter blade sliced through the heavy Amazon air, scattering birds and lifting leaves in wild spirals. Below, a sea of green stretched endlessly, its canopy concealing mysteries older than civilization. Dr. Camila Ruiz, a biologist from Manaus, peered out the window, her heart pounding. She wasn't here to find gold or cut timber. She was here to listen to the forest's secrets before they were lost. Her team landed in a remote quadrant of the rainforest, miles from the nearest human settlement. With every step into the undergrowth, the world changed. The scent of moss and decay clung to the air, punctuated by flashes of color, orchids clinging to trunks, frogs no larger than a thumbnail. The Amazon was no ordinary wilderness. It was a living archive. Camila remembered her first expedition years ago. She had discovered a flower that bloomed once every 7 years and wilted by moonrise. That was the Amazon. It offered miracles in whispers, then hid them away. But this journey was different. They were tracking an anomaly, a fungus unlike anything recorded before. Deep in the under canopy, in the dark, damp soil where most feet never tread, they found it, Pestilotiopsis microspora. To the untrained eye, it looked like any other mushroom. But under a microscope, it revealed a gift. It could eat plastic. Not merely degrade it, consume it, break it down molecule by molecule, even in oxygen-poor environments. Camila stared at the sample, stunned. In a world drowning in plastic, this tiny organism had the potential to heal a man-made wound. Here, in a patch of forest no one had ever named. Yet, even as they celebrated, the sound of chainsaws echoed in the distance. She knew what that meant. Somewhere nearby, another piece of this delicate puzzle was being destroyed, perhaps a cure for disease, perhaps the last of a species. In the Amazon, every loss was irreversible. That night, the team camped under the canopy. Rain drummed above as shadows shifted around them. Camila lay awake, notebook in hand, recording observations by headlamp. Then, a sound. A low growl, just beyond the trees. A jaguar. No one moved. The forest was silent, save for the slow beat of their hearts. The jaguar didn't attack. It watched, then vanished as silently as it had come. In that moment, Camila felt something profound, not fear, but humility. She was not the master here. She was a visitor, permitted entry only so long as the forest allowed. The next morning, they packed their samples, careful not to disturb more than they had to. Before departing, Camila placed a small flag near the fungus site, not to claim it, but to remember it. "This forest holds answers," she said quietly. "But only if we ask the right questions." As the helicopter rose above the canopy, she looked down one last time. The jungle rolled beneath them, vast, unknowable, alive. And still, it kept its deepest secrets. The forest's final whisper. A single ember drifted skyward, curling like a question mark into the smoky dawn. Beneath it, the forest smoldered, charred trunks, blackened earth, silence where birds once sang. In the Brazilian state of Rondônia, the Amazon was burning again. But this time, a new voice rose with the smoke. Sai Surue, just 24 years old, stood at the edge of the devastation. Her long black hair whipped in the wind as she addressed a circle of elders, their faces lined with history and grief. "This land does not belong to us," she said, her voice steady. "We belong to it. And it is calling for help." Born into the Pater Surue tribe, Tsai had grown up walking beneath trees older than her ancestors' memory. Her father, a tribal leader, had taught her that the forest was sacred, a teacher, a healer, a parent. But in recent years, she had watched that parent wounded again and again, by fire, by greed, by silence. In 2019, over 3.5 million hectares of Amazon rainforest were lost. Fires, many intentionally set to clear land for cattle, raged out of control. The world watched in horror, hashtags trending for a moment before fading. But for those who lived in the forest, the consequences endured. And yet, not all was lost. Tsai, armed not with weapons but with stories and satellite data, began organizing. She joined with scientists, technologists, and indigenous youth to form an unlikely alliance. Together, they mapped illegal deforestation zones, used drones to monitor encroachment, and created mobile apps that alerted villages when their lands were threatened. "We do not need to invent a new future," she told the United Nations. "We need to remember the old one." She wasn't alone. In Peru, teenagers replanted native species along riverbanks. In Colombia, ecotourism gave communities an income without cutting trees. Internationally, funds like the Amazon Fund were revived, funneling resources into local conservation. And companies, shamed by exposure, began sourcing from sustainable suppliers. But the battle was far from over. One evening, as the sun set behind the scorched horizon, Tsai walked the edge of a reforested plot. Tiny saplings stood like sentinels, fragile yet stubborn. She crouched beside one, brushing the soil from its roots. "We planted this a year ago," she murmured. "It was just a stick then. Now it's growing." A child from the village came running up, a hand-carved pendant in her palm. "This is for you," the girl said, "to protect you when you speak for the trees." Tsai smiled, tears threatening to rise. She didn't know if they could save the whole forest. But they would try. Every speech, every seed, every line of code, they were all part of the same chant. A call for life. Above them, the canopy stirred. Somewhere, a howler monkey cried. A breeze rustled the new leaves. The Amazon was still breathing. But only just. And it would only keep breathing if we listened.